Hello and welcome to a party. That's right, we're going to have a party this week on Monochrome Monday. Yes, it's a meme party because we are doing one of the most memed horror movies of all time simply because of this little jewel right here.
I'm Frederick Lauren, and I've rented the house on Haunted Hill tonight so that my wife can give a party. A haunted house party. She's so amusing. There'll be food and drink and ghosts, and perhaps even a few murders. You're all invited. If any of you will spend the next 12 hours in this house, I'll give you each $10,000, or your next of kin in case you don't survive. Ah, but here come our other guests. It was my wife.
That's right, if you don't know this movie, it is The House on Haunted Hill. And as we promised you last week, we were going to do another Castle and White production here. Of course, William Castle directed it, Rob White wrote it, and Vincent Price stars in it. So let's get started, shall we? By the way, this film is in the public domain. So let's get started. Frederick Lauren, an eccentric millionaire, invites 5 people to a party he is throwing for his 4th wife, Annabelle, in an allegedly haunted house he has rented. He promises to give each guest $10,000 with the stipulation they have to stay the entire night in the house after all the doors are locked at midnight. All the windows are barred, and there are no phones and radios to use. The guests are test pilot Lance Schroeder, newspaper columnist Ruth Bridges, psychiatrist Dr. David Trent, who specializes in hysteria. That'll be important later. Nora Manning, who works for one of Lauren's companies, and the house owner Watson Pritchard. All are strangers to both the Lorens and each other, their only commonality being a lust for money. The Lorens have a tense relationship. Frederick is convinced Annabelle is trying to poison him to acquire his wealth, which Annabelle somewhat, evasively denies. Attributing his suspicions to paranoia and jealousy, Watson believes the house is genuinely haunted by the ghosts who are murdered there, including his own brother. He claims to have spent one night there before and was almost dead when found the next morning. He gives the tour of the house, including a vat of acid in the basement, which a previous resident used to kill his wife. When Lance and Nora remain behind to further explore the basement, Lance is locked in an empty room and struck on the head while a menacing ghost confronts Nora. Annabelle privately warns Lance that her husband is scheming something and that she suspects him of murdering his 2nd and 3rd wives after his 1st wife mysteriously disappeared. The guests learn the party's rules downstairs, and each is given a Colt Model 1903 pocket hammer for protection. That's a pew-pew, for those of you wondering. Having encountered further apparitions, Nora decides against staying the night, but the caretakers lock the door 5 minutes early. Taking that option is out of the guests' hands. After hearing a scream, Lance and David find Annabelle's corpse suspended to suggest she hung herself, but in the absence of a perch immediately arouses suspicion of murder. Nora confronts Lance and tells him of an unseen assailant strangling her and leaving her for dead. In light of Annabelle's warnings, they both suspect Frederick. He tells her to remain out of sight so that her attacker will think that she is dead. Lance and David propose that everyone stay in their rooms and shoot anyone who enters during the night. Thus, the innocents will have no reason to leave their rooms, and the killer must stay put or admit guilt. Nora is chased from her room into the basement by Annabelle's ghost. Aroused by the ghostly sounds, David concludes that the killer is out and about and proposes he and Frederick split up to search the house. Lance uncovers a secret room at the end of the 2nd floor hall, but shuts behind him once he enters, trapping him. David instead meets with Annabelle, who faked her death using a hanging harness and sedatives Secretly lovers, the two of them had orchestrated the various mishaps to manipulate Nora into killing Frederick. Nora, seeing Frederick enter the basement with a gun in his hand, does indeed shoot him. After he flees, David slips in to dispose of Frederick's body in the vat of acid as the lights go out. Annabelle walks to the basement to confirm her husband is dead. A skeleton rises from the acid and accuses her in Frederick's voice and shoves her into the vat. Frederick emerges from the shadows holding the puppeteer control unit that he used to manipulate the skeleton and revealing he had known their plot all along. After Nora, Watson, and Ruth release Lance from the secret room, Nora tells them that she shot Frederick. When they arrive in the cellar, Frederick explains that he loaded her gun with blanks, that his wife and David plotted to kill him, and they both met their ends in the vat of acid. He says he is ready for justice and decides if he's innocent or guilty. Watson remains convinced the house is haunted, with David and Annabelle now added to its ranks of ghosts, and that he will be the next victim. So Vincent Price, of course, is Frederick. Carol Omhart is Annabelle. Lance Schroeder, played by Richard Long. Alan Marshall is Dr. Trent. Carolyn Craig is Nora Manning. Alicia Cook Jr. is Watson Pritchard, and she's credited as just Alicia Cook. Julie Mitchum is Ruth Bridgers. Leona Anderson is Mrs. Slides. And, of course, Howard Hoffman is Jonas Slides. Now, here comes some interesting lore about this movie. Now, exterior shots at the Ennis house in Los Feliz, California, which was designed and built by Frank Lloyd Wright in 1924. The bulk of the film was shot on sound stages, depicting the interior of the house in a combination of styles, including 1890s Victorian with gas chandeliers, I should say, and sconces. The poster for the film included an illustration of the house in yet a third style, this time in a Romanesque structure. Now again, a lot of the people that are familiar with this movie are very familiar with the fact that there's a meme that goes around every once in a while that says, "This is how you get me out of the house." And then it has Vincent Price's face, and it has "There will be food and drink and ghosts." They should add in, "and perhaps a few murders." But, again, like I said earlier, this is a public domain movie as well. Now, they did use many props that are used in Carnival haunted houses as well to add on to the fear. It's in Emergo. Now, Emergo is very interesting because Emergo, we talked about it last week with the Tingler. You had the seats that were vibrating. But you also had Smell-O-Vision, which would release odors during certain scenes. It was even parodied... That was even parodied in Kentucky Fried Movie. I don't know if you've ever seen it. But in Kentucky Fried Movie, you'd have this guy who would sit down in the movie theater. And the usher would be right behind him. And then the scene would play out. And then it would spritz the perfume. The usher would light a cigarette and blow it in their face. Hit them. That sort of thing. I always thought this was cool. And I really, really, really wish that we still had things like that today. But it is very, very expensive to do things like this. So I totally can understand why they don't do a lot of this now. And it's just easier to release. It's cheaper to release, I should say, a popcorn bucket that looks like an adult toy. That's all I'm going to say. All right. So I hope you enjoyed it this week. We've done a couple now on, especially with our friends William Castle and Rob White. And I hope you're enjoying Vincent Price Month, because next week we have The Invisible Man Returns. We'll see you next week right here on Monochrome Monday.